Hello dear students, welcome to the Hindu Newspaper Analysis by BAJIRAO IAS Academy. Today 5th of April, and today we have few important news articles from the Hindu newspaper. So before discussing all those important news articles, let's try to solve yesterday's practice question. So the question was, recently Union Ministry of Home Affairs has extended Armed Forces Special Powers Act in parts of which of the following states? So the correct answer for this question is option C, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. So this Armed Forces Special Powers Act was brought by the Union government to prevent the violence that has been taking place in few northeast states as well as the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So Armed Forces Special Powers Act has been giving exceptional powers to the armed forces, and there was also criticism of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act curbing on the civil liberties of the people where it has been imposed. So the correct answer for this question is option C, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. So today's prelims practice question is the Clean Energy Transition Program, an ambitious effort to accelerate global clean energy transitions, is an initiative of which of the following organizations? Option A, United Nations Environment Program. Option B, World Economic Forum. Option C, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And option D, International Energy Agency. Please try to answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer for this question I'll be providing you in tomorrow's lecture. So let's try to discuss few important news articles. So this news article especially for the mains exam perspective, and that deals with the healthcare in India, healthcare system in India. If you look at mains syllabus, healthcare system is specifically mentioned in General Studies paper 2 of the UPSC mains examination. So in this particular article, we will be talking about the healthcare expenditure by the union government, and apart from that, what are the major areas where we need to improve ourselves to provide universal access to primary healthcare facilities. Now in this particular article, the author has been talking about the 2024 general elections are actually a time to look at the healthcare expenditure in India. So it is suggested that the total healthcare expenditure is less than 2.5% of GDP. It is said that the healthcare expenditure in India is below 2% of the GDP. However, the government is optimistic that by the year 2025, we will reach 2.5% of GDP in healthcare expenditure. We all know that by 2025, Indian economy would become around $3.87 trillion economy. So therefore, in this context, the union government have to spend around 3 lakh rupees on the healthcare sector in order to ensure that everyone is eligible for the universal healthcare. However, if you look at the total healthcare spending in India, it is around 90,000 crores. So 90,000 crores is inadequate for the proper and better healthcare access to every eligible individual. So therefore, what we need to do, we need to further increase our healthcare expenditure to around 3 lakh per annum, or it could be taken to 2.5% or 3% of the GDP. So that is how we can substantially improve our public healthcare system, and at the same time we will be able to provide better healthcare for every individual. Now please remember, healthcare plays a very important role in ensuring productive and prosperous workforce, and this is also plays a very important role in ensuring better standards of living for every individual. And in fact, if you look at the proper healthcare, this ensures proper learning outcomes in every children, and it will also significantly and substantially reduces the maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rates in India. They are one of the highest. So therefore, we should also remember that these are all should be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. In fact, the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 also talks about the universal access to the healthcare for every individual. So therefore, we need to be guided on this front. However, in this front, we should recognize the strength of the private sector as well. So the author has been suggesting that the government or the public sector alone cannot fulfill the goal of providing universal health care. Along with the government, the private sector should also play a larger role in providing better healthcare access. Now, if you look at the total healthcare structure in India, 70% of the healthcare services are provided by the private sector alone. So therefore, both public sector and private sector should complement each other, and this is what the author has been suggesting that. So one such example where public sector and private sector have come together in providing better healthcare facility is Ayushman Bharat health scheme. Now we all know that the Ayushman Bharat health insurance program provides 5 lakh rupees of health insurance to around 60 crore population. So therefore, this is one such healthy example of better healthcare facilities where public and private sectors have come together. And apart from that, there is a need to substantially improve the existing healthcare infrastructure in India. And in this way, we should also focus on the private sector. And especially the author has been emphasizing on we need to include healthcare sector as a priority sector lending. If you look at the priority sector lending norms, these priority sector lending is being provided for agriculture sector, MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises, and self-help group women, and even the renewable energy sectors. So these are some sectors where the production priority sector lending is being provided. So in a similar way, healthcare infrastructure should also be provided under the priority sector lending. So therefore, the private healthcare facilities and infrastructure would also be substantially increased. And apart from that, since 70% of the healthcare is provided by the private sector alone, the author has been emphasizing on making it more and more affordable for the people. And at the same time, we need to look at reducing the total out-of-pocket expenditure of the healthcare. If you look at the statistics, it is said that 42% of the total income goes for the healthcare costs alone. So therefore, in this context, we need to make the private healthcare affordable, and we should also look at reducing the out-of-pocket expenditure. So this is what the author has been emphasizing on. And apart from these things, the author also talks about the communicable, non-communicable diseases. So if you look at the non-communicable diseases, they form around 65% of the total disease burden. So therefore, the author has been suggesting that we need to focus on changing the existing lifestyles which have promoting non-communicable diseases. For example, cancer is a non-communicable diseases, heart stroke is a non-communicable diseases. So these are some of the non-communicable diseases, and we must change the lifestyles of the people to avoid these non-communicable diseases as well as the total disease burden. So after that, the author has also been suggesting that we must focus on the primary health care sector, further and incentivizing and expanding the primary health care access, because when we provide primary health care access facilities to all individuals, to all peoples, so that could reduce burden on the secondary and tertiary healthcare system. So therefore, we should also focus on further developing the healthcare infrastructure through higher budgetary allocations. Apart from that, the author has been saying that we should not look at the healthcare expenditure as a burden on exchequer. Rather, it should be seen as investment on a productive gains in the future. There is no doubt that if we invest in the healthcare sector, that could result in productive gains in the future. So this is how the author has been emphasizing. The other issue that the author is talking about is human resources development, human resources with respect to the healthcare sector. Now, if you look at the patient-doctor ratio and patient and other healthcare staff ratio, it is one of the lowest in India. So therefore, we must improve or further increase the existing staff capacity so that we can deal with any unforeseen event and we will be able to provide better healthcare facilities to every individual, and that will help in achieving the universal access to healthcare and also the sustainable development goals by 2030. So in a nutshell, this is what the author has been talking about in this particular article. Now we will look at the highlights. Yes, the author has said that healthcare is actually a vital investment for nation's total well-being and prosperity. So since it is a vital investment, the governments should not look at the healthcare expenditure as a burden on the exchequer. Okay, so it should not be seen as a burden on the exchequer. Rather, we must see this as a productive and strategic investment, because this strategic investment will yield human capital development, or it will result in human capital development, economic growth and sustainable development in the future. So because of that reason, the author has been suggesting that healthcare expenditure must be seen as a strategic investment. And after that, we should prioritize health, and we should also acknowledge the importance of allocating more and more funds to the national healthcare. And in fact, if you look at the total government spending, it is 2.5% of the GDP. That is what the government has committed to spend on the healthcare by the year 2025. And apart from that, the author has also been suggesting that the government should play a catalytic role between private sector and the public sector. And in fact, we have a lot of strength with respect to the private sector, and we should leverage those strengths in both public sector as well as the private sectors. And we need to focus on forging the strategic partnerships and at the same time incentivizing the existing sector. Because as I have already told you, nearly 70% of the healthcare needs are fulfilled by the private sector alone. So therefore, in this context, it is very important that we need to ensure the quality of health services. In order to provide quality of health services, we need to make sure the private sector healthcare has necessary infrastructure, and at the same time the healthcare is more affordable, and we should also reduce or bridge the existing gaps in the healthcare system. As I have already told you, the author has given the example of Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, as it has been providing 5 lakh hospitalization cover or insurance cover for 60 crore poor people in India. And in fact, as per statistics, 2/3 of the total money spent goes to the private hospitals in India. So therefore, it has been indicating that most of the patients have been preferring the private hospitals. So therefore, in this context, the scheme which was adopted, but majority of medium and large hospitals are not joined in the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana scheme. Why? Because the state governments or the governments have not reimbursing the medical costs, and because of that reason several medium and large private hospitals were not part of this Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So we must overcome this particular drawback or shortcoming to make sure that we leverage the better healthcare access provided by the private sector. So therefore, in order to draw more participation from the private sector, we need to reimburse the medical costs to those private hospitals. And apart from that, the government should also provide a conducive ecosystem, and the private sector needs to reciprocate the quality and affordable healthcare services that it could provide to the public. And apart from that, it is said that it is high time that healthcare sector should be accorded the national priority status. And in fact, we can make it eligible for the priority sector lending. So under priority sector lending, the healthcare can get funds at a priority basis on similar lines to agriculture, education, MSMEs and housing. And apart from that, we must strengthen our existing primary healthcare system through 1.7 lakh health and wellness centers are now they are renamed as Ayushman Arogya Mandirs. So these health and wellness centers are known as Ayushman Arogya Mandirs. So they will ensure better health outcomes, lower out-of-pocket expenditures, and reduce the total burden on the secondary and tertiary hospitalization. So this is the next important article. So that is with respect to allocation of symbols to the political parties in India. So we all know that every political party in India have one particular symbol. So not just the political parties, but any candidate who is contesting an election on behalf of a political party or an independent candidate can also be given a symbol, and this symbol can be used as a mark that represent the political party or a candidate. In a country like India, where we have just 74% of the literacy rates, the symbols play a very important role in further strengthening democracy, because very often voters identify the candidates and the political parties with these symbols. Now in this context, it is important that we need to understand how these symbols are allocated to different political parties and candidates who are contesting on independent basis. Now let's understand what is the context. The context is same that we are going for the general elections in April and May. So therefore, all the political parties and candidates have given their own symbols along with the symbols given to their respective political parties also. So in this context, what is an election symbol? That is what we will understand first. An election symbol is actually an electoral or election symbol, and that is considered as a standardized symbol, and that is being allocated to a political party. Now if you look at the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party political party, so it has a lotus flower as a symbol. And if you look at the Congress, it has a hand gesture as a symbol. On a similar lines, different political parties have different symbols. So these symbols are given by the Election Commission of India under the Election Symbols Reservation Allotment Amendment Order 2017. So under this particular order, the Election Commission allocates symbols to every political party as well as every candidate in India. Okay, so they are either considered as reserved symbols or free symbols. So reserved symbols are given to some recognized political parties, and there will be a pool of free symbols as well. So as of now, 8 national parties and 64 state parties across the country will be given the reserved symbols. For example, Indian National Congress is a national party, Bharatiya Janata Party is also a national party, and recently Aam Aadmi Party was also recognized as a national party. So those national parties along with 64 state parties were given the reserved symbols, and Election Commission of India has a pool of nearly 200 free symbols. So these symbols are actually allotted for thousands of unrecognized regional political parties across the country. So these are reserved symbols and free symbols. So followed by that, so they are actually used by these political parties, because if you can understand, these symbols are very often shown in the electronic voting machines. So a candidate name, a candidate photo, as well as the symbol of that particular candidate and the political party is shown in the electronic voting machine, where the voter chooses the particular symbol and votes for the associated party of that particular symbol. So in fact, it is said that the symbol in India is one of the extremely important and extreme relevance to any political survival and further strengthening democracy in India. So why? Because if you look at the Indian voters who do not read what is mentioned in the electronic voting machines, they can identify the candidate and the political party with the symbol that is being associated with the party. Okay, so therefore based on this they can exercise their franchise, and hence importance is given to the symbol by any candidate or any political party. So we all know that we have 74% of literacy rate only, and in order to make sure that every individual, every eligible voter cast their vote, the symbol plays a very important role in the election process. And in fact, so if you look at the Election Commission of India's powers with respect to allocation of these symbols, the election symbols reservation and allotment order 1968, so this particular order empowers the Election Commission of India. So that Election Commission of India recognizes political parties and accordingly allot symbols for those respective political parties. And in fact, in case if there is any dispute between the political parties with respect to the symbols, the Election Commission of India can decide on those disputes. In case those parties are not satisfied with the judgment or authority of the Election Commission of India, so they can file a case with respect to this dispute in the higher court. So therefore in this context, the disputes among the rival groups and sections recognized political party staking claim to its name and symbol, and those disputes are decided by the Election Commission of India. Now in this context, please understand the Election Commission of India is the only authority which can decide these issues on whether with respect to the merger of any political party or a separation of any political party. All right, so this applies to disputes in recognized national parties and state parties, and however, if any of the parties is not satisfied with the judgment of the Election Commission of India or decision of the Election Commission of India regarding this, so they can approach the higher courts for the better judgment on this. Okay, so this is what with respect to the poll symbols. And next important article is with respect to recent Supreme Court judgment with respect to the industrial alcohol. So we all know that the Indian Constitution Schedule 7 has provided for alcohol. Okay, so alcohol. So Indian Constitution Schedule 7 has provided for 3 lists. So they are state list, concurrent list and the union list. So therefore there is a very often the issue that is with respect to the jurisdiction of lawmaking on different subjects. Now in this context, for years the states and union have been pitted on who has the legislative competence over each type of alcohol. So there are different types of alcohol, and one type of alcohol is industrial alcohol. Now in this context, there was an issue that has been going on with respect to the powers or the legislative competence over making laws on different types of alcohol. However, in recent or latest update, the Supreme Court of India has ruled that the state's power to legislate to regulate industrial alcohol is actually untrammeled or complete. With respect to industrial alcohol, the Supreme Court has said that the state legislature has a complete power to make any legislation on this. If we can go into the details of this particular article, so there is an overlapping jurisdiction on various lists which are mentioned in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So because of the overlapping jurisdiction between the union legislature and state legislature, it is a very often bone of contention between both of them. Now if you look at entry 52 of the union list in the parliament, so it suggests that, or it empowers the central government to regulate certain industries that parliament finds them to be of public importance. In case if parliament believes that any industry is of a public importance or public interest, then the union government can regulate that particular industry, and that is mentioned in the entry 52 of the union list. Secondly, Parliament acting in accordance with the union list through section 18G of the Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, or it is also known as the Industries Act, and it is actually entrusted with the power to regulate specific products which are related to the scheduled industries to the union government. So under section 18G of the Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, the central government can regulate certain industries or certain products. So in fact, it is said that this was done to ensure these products were being distributed fairly and stood as a reasonable prices. So there are certain industry who have monopoly on few products. So if they have monopoly on those products, the prices of those products would be unreasonable and very high. So in order to make sure the prices of those products are reasonable, the center would intervene and regulate the prices of those commodities, and for that particular purpose, the entry 52 of the union list and section 18G of the Industries Development and Regulation Act actually empower the central government with this respect. Next, so under 8 of the state list also, remember, as I have already told you, there is an overlapping jurisdiction on making laws or legislations. So under entry 8 of the state list, a state is actually empowered to make laws with respect to intoxicating liquors. Intoxicating liquors, that is to say, they can make legislation with respect to production, manufacturing, possession, transport, purchase and sale of these intoxicating liquors. So it essentially means that entry 8 of Schedule 7 state list has been providing the powers to the state legislature to make a legislation on production, manufacturing, possession and transport of any intoxicating liquors. However, there is another entry 33 of the concurrent list also. Now if you look at the concurrent list consists of few subjects such as education is part of the concurrent list and forest is part of the concurrent list. So concurrent list has subjects where both the state government and the union government can make or can pass a legislation on this. So entry 33 of the concurrent list says that state and union governments can actually make laws on different products of any industry in case even if Parliament has granted control to the union in the public interest. So this is what entry 33 of the concurrent list says. So in this context, the Supreme Court has interpreted the recent judgment in the light of entry 33 in the concurrent list. And apart from that, therein lies a confusion who has the power to regulate the industrial alcohol, the state or union. However, the recent judgment of the Supreme Court has actually cleared this confusion, saying that the state legislature has the complete power over the making legislation with respect to the industrial alcohol. Now, if you look at some facts with respect to the industrial alcohol is not used for human consumption. Rather, the industrial alcohol is used as a raw material which is used to create other products, but it is not meant for the human consumption. So this is all with respect to the powers of union government as well as the state government with respect to making laws on the industrial alcohol and Supreme Court's judgment. So recently, USA has asked India that India should curb oil imports from Russia. So we all know that Russia has attacked Ukraine. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all the G7 countries have come together and they have extended support to the Ukraine. And in fact, they have also supporting Ukraine through defense supplies as well as the other material supplies. However, after the invasion by Russia on Ukraine, all the European countries have cut down their crude oil supplies from Russia and as well as the natural gas supplies. So, in order to reduce Russia financing its war efforts through the oil which is being exported to countries like India and China, the G7 countries have actually imposed oil price cap. Now in this context, we will understand what exactly is the oil price cap by these G7 countries. We all know that Russia is known for rich oil and natural gas reserves. When Russia invaded Ukraine, all European countries which traditionally purchase oil from Russia have either reduced their imports or cut down their imports from Russia, thereby significantly reducing their reliance on Russian oil. However, Russia has looked for alternatives to European Union. So now in this context, third world countries and India, China have become the potential alternatives where Russia can supply its oil to these countries. And in fact, these countries are starved of energy resources and they have disproportionately dependent on Middle East for their energy supplies. And in fact, the Middle East also charges different prices as part of the Asian premium. Now, in this context, these countries have also started purchasing Russian oil. So in fact, India has become one of the country which produces the large amount of crude oil. In fact, Russia has emerged as India's top source of oil import. So therefore, in this context, in order to reduce Russia using the crude oil sourced money against Ukraine, or to prevent Russia using the money to finance Ukraine war, the G7 countries have imposed the price cap on the crude oil prices. So it essentially means that crude oil of each barrel should not be more than $60. So if it is more than $60, then certain services such as transportation, shipping, insurance would not be extended to the oil which is being shipped above $60. So please try to understand this in a very brief manner. Okay. So first and foremost, let's try to understand this, that the oil price cap has actually come into force. Okay, so the oil price cap has actually come into force when Russia has been using its oil revenue to finance its war efforts on Ukraine. So under this price cap, so the oil will not be sold more than $60 per barrel. So if it is sold more than $60 per barrel, there will be certain sanctions on the shipping companies which transport the crude oil. So because of that reason, Russia is concerned with respect to the oil price cap. Now, if you look at most of these shipping companies, they belong to either G7 countries, or those shipping companies are actually countries where they have been enjoying strong relations with all these G7 countries. So since they have enormous and significant influence, it in fact concerns Russia, because Russia cannot sell their crude oil for more than $60. And because of that reason, it could have the potential to reduce Russia's revenues from the crude oil. And in fact, it is said that this particular price cap will also impact India's interests. How it could impact India's interests? Because imposing the price cap will make sure that the shipping companies will not supply the oil to India, because Russia is actually not ready to supply oil for $60. And if Russia says that their crude oil would cost, or they would sell the crude oil for more than $60, then shipping companies would not be ready to supply oil to other countries, because most of these shipping companies belong to either G7 countries or their friends. So in this context, India will face the shortage of the oil supplies from Russia. However, the positive side of this is that India in fact look for the other alternatives to the crude oil, because crude oil is one of the source of fossil fuel or emission of carbons. So therefore, India should look for other alternatives for these crude oil. India will not disproportionately dependent on Russia for its crude oil resources. So that is a very important, and at the same time, it gradually enhances its renewable energy capacities as well, so that these international volatilities will not impact the domestic economic growth and economic development. It is true that India has a rising and growing economy, and that requires a lot of oil revenues, or that requires a lot of oil resources. However, in this context, it is very important that we need to look for other alternatives as well to avoid these international volatility with respect to the oil markets. So that is what this article has been saying about. So that's all for today, and thank you so much, and sorry for the inconvenience that is being caused. Thank you.